And for our on-site audience, we will now proceed to our keynote sections. In this section, we are delighted to have Ms. Peggy Liu, chairperson of Joint U.S.-China Collaboration on Clean Energy, to share with us on the topic, Catalyzing Societal Change for a Greener Future. Peggy will be joining us virtually. And in this section, we are very delighted to have Ms. Vanessa Cheng, Group Managing Director of Nanfeng Development Limited, and Mr. Raymond Mack, Co-founder and CEO of Pharmacy Hong Kong Limited, to be our respondents. And also Mr. Anthony Chung, Supervisory Board Member, World Benchmarking Alliance, to be the facilitator for this keynote section. Let's welcome them with a big round of applause. Now with our guests ready, I'll now pass the stage to you, Anthony.
Thank you. So a very good afternoon, everyone, joining here in Hong Kong. And a very warm welcome to the sessions. We have got the keynote sharing from Peggy, and also the sessions on catalyzing societal change for a greener future. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you would spot the first buzzword would be catalyzing. Catalyzing means acceleration, and we want it happen faster. And that is twofold, right? One is definitely, on societal change, so S in the ESG, and the other one for the greener future. So this session is really about connecting the catalyst between the E and S within ESG. First of all, I would like you all to, join me to welcome Vanessa and Raymond joining us here from Hong Kong, and also Peggy joining us virtually. I have read Peggy's bio, and I must say that I'm humbled by reading it. I myself is an ESG investor, so all the areas that Peggy's have probably having a push on, whether it's green tech, smart grid, eco-cities, efficient lightings, and green bonds are something that I have been doing for quite some time, and something that I'm very passionate about. But one thing that I would like to highlight to you all is that Peggy will host a masterclass for SES about tornado leadership, something that all of us should be very much look forward to. So without further ado, may I pass the time to Peggy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, everybody at SES in Hong Kong. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person this year with you, but I'm so glad to have a short 15 minutes just to give you a couple stories, hopefully, that will give you a flavor for what it's like to be an entrepreneur and somebody who really cares about the world, the future of the world, how we can work together with the government, civil society, to make huge China-wide changes. So first of all, I just wanted to reintroduce myself. I am the chairperson, co-founder of Joint U.S.-China Collaboration on Clean Energy. And this is a nonprofit, really an NGO that was started in 2007. This was 3 years after I landed in Shanghai. And I was asked by the US government and the Chinese government to found an NGO that would help with programmatic collaboration. And what we both decided to do, both sides, we decided to catalyze warp speed, not just incremental, not just exponential, but warp speed change in the society, in the China systems, to better the personal and planetary health for all of us in China, and therefore help the rest of the world go green. Because without China, the rest of the world certainly is not going to be able to go green. And US in 2007 really recognized that. This was the MIT Forum on the Future of Energy in China. This was probably the first ever interdisciplinary clean tech conference in China. And I put it together really as a whim, on a whim, as an MIT alumni. to help the new president at the time, the first female president of MIT, to really help her wish to bring together life sciences and clean energy as two of the biggest hubs at MIT. And I said, look, my friend, Ira Ehrenpreis in Silicon Valley, the first ever clean tech investor, was doing a lot of these really interesting forums about clean tech investing. And at the time, I had just moved from Silicon Valley, where I had been a long-term serial entrepreneur in the internet industry. And then I was helping a lot of VC companies come together with the entrepreneurs. I ended up becoming a VC in China, in Shanghai, when I first moved there. And I said, hey, why don't I just put together all my friends, some hotshot VCs from Silicon Valley, and I'll bring some interesting people from China, and we'll call it the first ever Clean Tech Investors Conference in China. This was in Shanghai, and it accidentally became this historic milestone event for the clean tech industry. What was very interesting in the private dialogues was the Chinese and the American government said they had 60 memorandums of understanding at that moment, but nothing tangible to show for it. And so they're very frustrated because they did have the good intent to work together, but the cultural gap was just too wide. And so they needed a nonprofit or an NGO to sit in the middle to help with programmatic collaboration. And that's where a lot of you in the audience can help as well, be this cultural bridge in many, many multidimensional ways. So this really was on the heels of China's first ever climate change plan, also released in 2007. So this really was historic and helped catalyze the clean tech energy, bringing in people from the US, all around China, from different industries, not just solar, not just wind, but also coal, talking about clean coal, also companies like BP interested in moving away from just oil and gas. Very interesting milestone in China's history, because as we know, several years later, China rapidly became the clean tech laboratory of the world, from being just known as the factory of the world in such a short amount of time. And the rapid greening of China is really reflected in numbers. I hate showing numbers because nobody's going to really understand them, but the key to this is to understand that China has made such a large commitment, it's almost unimaginable in 2007 to say that we're going to go net zero, carbon neutral by 2060, to have the gall to be able to make that commitment, knowing that that's like turning a high-speed rail train in a U-turn. And I like to tell people all around the world who are not familiar with Gansu, I love to show these pictures because number one, they're just beautiful. But somehow, even though we have really high winds, really hot sun, from the Himalayas to the Gobi Desert, somehow 26 million people thought it was a good idea to live here. And in a short amount of time, Gansu actually became a hub for leading solar projects, and now the world's largest onshore wind farm in Gansu. I think it's 20 gigawatts currently of wind power, world's largest wind turbine. That's actually a satellite of the turbines on the land, the upper right corner. The solar is Asia's first molten salt solar plant. It's really amazing and innovative. So they took what was a deficit in the environment and made it an amazing milestone again in Chinese history and world history in clean tech. I want to tell you that it's not just about policymakers. It's not just about SOEs. It really does start with one person's imagination, the daringness to imagine greater than anybody else, a picture of a better future. So I want to show you this one girl, Ada, at 15 years old. She won a speech contest for the UN DP. And she said she'd really like to get teens her age involved in renewable energy. And she had a great idea. Her idea was to make panda-shaped solar farms. I think Hello Kitty would be great too. But amazingly, she was so passionate, and she came with these photoshopped images like the one on the bottom left, that in 2 years from her speech, the Panda Energy Company, the UNDP, and China Merchants Bank came together and actually built 2 of these panda-shaped solar farms. No joke, you can Google it. And they committed to $3 billion to implement 100 of them across China. It only starts with one of you in the audience to think bigger than anybody has allowed you to in society, and just think bigger than even your dreams at night. Think as big as possible. That starts a tornado of change. I'll give you a couple stories of what I worked on personally. I lived through this. I can testify that China was able to make these changes. Each of these changes I'm going to show you happened in 3 years, maybe even a little bit less. For example, juice was asked by the US government out of this first MIT forum, out of the founding of juice, to introduce this new technology called smart grid, 智能电网 in Chinese, into China. At the time, okay, I have to say I'm an electrical engineer major from MIT, but I didn't know what smart grid was, but that's okay. I had the willingness to provide a safe space for experts to come in. And we ultimately found the CEO of Duke Energy, now the largest utility in America. We had the US Department of Energy, and they brought, through their passion and their belief that we could do something really worthwhile that would change the world together, US and China. We brought in then the vice president from IBM, vice president from Cisco in charge of smart grid, and all these very interesting experts. At the time, all the experts were mainly in the US. And I created a commitment at the Clinton Global Initiative. This is the President Clinton Foundation. For 10 years, what you do is you make an announcement to do a commitment, and then on the honor system, you make sure that that happens. So I did a commitment with the CEO of Duke Energy to do 3 smart grid forums in China with these international experts. This is the beginning, before everybody arrived, of some of the key players here. And now you might notice, hey, I'm the only female here. Well, electrical grid stuff is still very, very male. And it just so happened that I have an electrical engineering background, so I understood what they were saying without really being a smart grid expert. But I knew how to ask the right questions. So I created a safe space. A lot of what we do as social entrepreneurs is to nurture creativity and sharing, and not to criticize or to talk about barriers right away. Within 2.5 years, we did Shanghai, Beijing, and Yangzhou. Unbelievably, the China State Grid, one of the 2 grid companies in China, the 80% to the 20%, they committed $7.2 billion to implement smart grid by 2020. That is less than 2.5 years from when I was asked to bring smart grid into China. I'm going to tell you how early this was. At the time, I had to make up the term in Chinese for smart grid. It didn't even exist. And I went to China State Grid with a little picture of all the elements of smart grid. And one of them was an electric vehicle. And they looked at this and they said, electric vehicle, maybe you should come back in 10 years. This is too like science fiction, right? At the time, they weren't even talking about electric vehicles. we know what history happened, right? In China, we very quickly became the leader in electric vehicles. So the key is to understand that people need to tap into this higher sense of imagination, even beyond what reality is telling you you can do now. Just know that as long as we can imagine it, as long as we can reach for the stars, that creates the potential that it can become reality. This was the third event in Yangzhou. The mayor of Yangzhou and the head of the US Department of Energy. I know this seems almost impossible to do today in this environment, and maybe it is, but at the time, this was the George Bush administration, George Bush Jr. And some people said this was going to be hard back then as well. But the key is to be a cultural bridge. So I happened to be born, for the first person in my whole Chinese family to be born in the US. And I had the initial part of my career there, but I moved to Shanghai in 2004 so I could be with my team at JUICE a really good cultural bridge. I was also a technical bridge between the different industries. Solar didn't really talk to wind, didn't talk to coal, didn't talk to gas. And somebody needs to bring them all together if we're going to talk about changing the system at a large scale. So you can see how fun they were having talking together about the future of smart grid in China. Believe it or not, after this event, the mayor of Yangzhou got a call from Jiang Zemin twice and said, wow, we have so much press from this conference. This is going to be a great economic potential for our city. What are you going to do about it? 9 months later, after he called me, he said, please do this again. Help us bring some of these corporates to create China's first ever smart grid demonstration hub. This was literally 9 months later. I was cutting the ribbon at this demo hub, which then became 15 cities piloting with large subsidies, which then became 25 cities. And then of course, now we have smart grid implemented across China. So very rapidly, China crossed that tipping point. In less than 3 years, it went from inefficient grid to a smart grid thought leader. Another example of a program that I was involved in was really based on this urbanization. China always knew that it had to urbanize, and it was going to go through a 40-year period of heavy urbanization. And in fact, just in 7 years, they spent almost $7 trillion on urbanization. And so because of all this building, China literally is a new country every 5 years. You know, having seen, I mean, that picture of cranes, I lived through that, right? At some point, all the tall, like a third of the world's tall cranes were in Shanghai. The middle picture, again, I lived through that. Okay, a lot of these are Shanghai, that's because I'm from Shanghai, I'm a little biased, but you know, you can see the chronology of mainland China is just unimaginable to people, certainly in America, as I travel around and I show these pictures in Europe. They cannot believe that, you know, your hometown, your Laojia, is almost unrecognizable when you go back every 2 years. So I wanted to give you a secret to how I helped create this trend for eco-cities. The week after I launched Joint US-China Collaboration on Clean Energy, JUICE, I brought the US government to meet the man in the middle in the front, the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development. And he asked, Qiu Baoxing asked us to create China's first eco-city class for the National Academy for Mayors of China, what used to be called the National Training Center for Mayors of China. This is the first government academy of what was 8 and now 7 government academies that carry out mandatory government training. Very few people know this, even in China. So if you're a government official of any level, you have to take 12 days minimum of training each year. And then when you get promoted, you might be there for a month, 3 months. You might get sent to Harvard Kennedy School for a year if you're very special. And so what I started to do, again, remember at this time, I was not an architect. I didn't know about eco-cities, but I knew how to find them and I knew how to bring them together. I knew how to create curriculum. I knew how to work together with the curriculum directors. I knew how to translate this into Chinese, and I knew how to be diplomatic so that we could invite people like the deputy mayor of London, who is the bottom right, Lao Wei over there, or a Columbia professor, the top right Lao Wei guy. You know, these people, when they come to China, I was the bridge to bring these experts so that they can understand how to speak in a way that we could land, you know, 落地, these best practices. So over the course of 8 years, I taught 1,000 government officials, mayors and up, central government officials. Incredible. And this is only because I was asked to lecture at the National Academy for Mayors of China, then the China Executive Leadership Academy of Pudong in Shanghai. And then I became a distinguished professor at the China Academy of Governance, which recently merged with the Party School. So this is incredible reach to the heart of government, heart of best practices, heart of policy in China. And so what one of the executives of the China Academy of Governance told me is that the reason why China has been able to become a new country every 5 years, but not have just complete chaos, but have it harmoniously change, it's because of education. Now, this might seem obvious to Chinese people, but for everybody outside of China, they are shocked to hear about this mandatory education. This is like the acupuncture system, the meridians that run through the government in China. So some of the classes that I help teach, that's actually me on the bottom left and the Deputy Mayor of London speaking about the Climate Change Action Plan from London. This was literally the first ever eco-city class for Chinese mayors. I brought in the head of the US Department of Energy, executives from McKinsey, many other people to talk about net zero buildings. This is in the Beijing Olympic Center. We did China's first ever low carbon transport class. And of course, now China is the leader, right? In 5 years, in 2007 to 2012, China started to build the high-speed rail and then quickly became the leader, world leader in high-speed rail. It just took 5 years. I love showing this picture because it just shows the speed of change in China. This is the same person, 26 years apart. We did the first ever class on transit-centered living, or what architects call transit-oriented design. And so I love to show this picture of where I live in Shanghai, where one day during Christmas, all of a sudden the government gave us 2 whole new subway lines. So underneath my feet in my block, I have 3 whole subway lines. And then of course, in China, this is very normal to have transit-centered living vertically and below, but this is not normal for the Western world and most of the rest of the world. So this is fantastic. We also created the first ever class that talked about livability, not just eco-city in a technical meaning, but what does it mean to be an eco-livable or eco-lovable city? So this was something that we had experts from around the world talk about key metrics for how do you design a city that people wanted to live in, that was so energetic, people magnetized to your city. Companies were magnetized to invest in your city. one thing that I didn't show, but it still boggles my mind to this date, is we created China's first municipal waste and water treatment class in China. And to me, I found, wow, that's incredible that so late in the game, China really started to implement and think about this type of municipal waste and water treatment. I mean, I just sort of took it for granted that cities did that, but apparently not. So what happens is, through this education channel, all these best practices we were bringing in from international, either virtual or in person. And we were bringing these and localizing them in the classes. And so every city could actually innovate on these best practices. We were doing city scale sustainable innovation. And in a way, sustainable technology can really only scale at city scale, not the way that a lot of Western cities are doing it, which is building by building by building, maybe road by road. That just doesn't work. So China has this incredible advantage when it comes to scaling the greening of China and therefore the rest of the world. Shortly after we started these eco-city classes, I noticed that other cities were starting to do urban planning museums, not just Shanghai. And there were just beautiful, beautiful buildings, architects' playground, as they call China. And each one of them shows what a city may look like in 20 years. And they may have this beautiful CGI movie with the voice of God narrating in a very melodramatic way how beautiful the city is. I think this is really lacking in a lot of other countries, Western countries, that they say they want to be the best, but they don't show what does that mean in a tangible way for my district or for me as Peggy in Shanghai on this street in Jing'anxu. You know, what does that actually mean? So these urban planning museums is a great advantage for China because it allows people to tangibly see themselves helping make this dream come true. That is one of the secrets of tornado leadership that I will teach you in the masterclass that I have promised SES to do soon. Hopefully we'll announce the date and time after this. So China really went from rural poor. Anybody who's lived in the mainland, you know, even in 2004 when I moved there, you know, a lot of Shanghai was being redeveloped. And now China, so Shanghainese. China is really the urban innovator in the entire world. I mean, I'm very astonished whenever I see my partners at Shanghai Tongji University with the newest eco plan that they're working on in some, you know, tier 3, tier 4 city. It's really incredible. And so along the way, China, as it's developed, has really been able to move from just survivability to really, how do we thrive as people? How do we have livable cities? Most of you may be familiar with the Loess Plateau in northern China, but if you haven't seen the documentaries, especially by John Dennis Liu, no relation to me, but he normally lives in Beijing. He did these amazing documentaries of how the World Bank in China and the local government worked together to turn this desert into permaculture the size of France. That is incredible in a short amount of time, what we can do together. Now, this is agroforestry. So you're growing not just trees, but trees that give life. And you know, over time, unfortunately, this is also in Shanghai. I don't know how many people remember this, where dead pigs were literally floating down the river there. But we've been able to, one of the programs that Juice worked on was Food Heroes starting in 2010 to make gamified curriculum for little kids in kindergarten and nursery school to learn about sustainable, healthy diet. Healthy diet for you, healthy diet for the planet. And then very quickly we started to get, this is an ad for Tony's like organic delivery service. They're starting to get, especially in top tier cities, a trend towards really focusing on thriving through the foods that we eat, and therefore making sure that that the soils thrive, that are growing the foods that come into our bodies so that we can thrive. And now that China is starting to climb up this ladder of wealth, I would say, natural wealth, economic wealth, environmental wealth, we're starting to share it with people. This man who passed away recently really is a hero that everybody should know. Hopefully he's a stamp somewhere, a postal stamp. But he dedicated his life to creating rice varieties that would be very resilient. And he cracked the nut on saline water rice. So rice that grows in salty water. And so now they're giving this technology away, these seeds, to places like the Arabian Peninsula, to Africa. And, if this works, one small plot of land can feed the entire Arabian Peninsula with this rice variety alone. So this is, I think, what Chinese people that I have worked with really believe, that not only are we innovating for ourselves, but we can be innovating to help the rest of the world. And certainly the reason why solar, the reason why wind has scaled is because China scaled it first. China made it happen. China made it accessible for the rest of the world. I'm going to tell you a slightly astonishing story of an initiative that I started in 2010. When I realized that we were doing a lot of hardware infrastructure type of sustainability programs, but sustainability is a balance between infrastructure, between generation and use, consumption. And if I don't address people and sustainable lifestyle, then that's just going to keep growing, and we're never going to be in balance. We're never going to be a green China. So I started to go around the world and ask as experts on behavior change. How did you stop smoking? How did you normalize gay lifestyles? How did you get the safety belt to be mandated? These are all questions that we can learn from as environmentalists or in any type of social entrepreneur field. So I asked the question, what if we were to reimagine prosperity, but embed sustainable lifestyle in it by default? And so when you say the China dream, of course you're going to have green grass. Of course you're going to have blue sky. For Westerners, this seems not a big deal, but I remember when I was starting Juice between 2007, 2010, I would hear stories of mothers and children going to other places to visit, and they'd be like, whoa, why is the sky blue? It was just unheard of. They didn't even know that that was normal. And so this was really important. So we started this China Dream initiative, and I asked for help around the world. And one of my friends, who is the head of an advertising company, Saatchi & Saatchi S, gave me his global creative director to work with me for free, pro bono, and he helped me use advertising techniques to create the image of a lifestyle, image of a reality that people would just salivate for, people would really want to live in, just like the Avatar world. That Pandora world was so interesting, so beautiful, that Jake, the protagonist, just wanted to live in that reality instead, that world instead. And so again, we started to do these workshops based on these advertising techniques, and we brought in Ogilvy, we brought in Edelman, and we did them in the mayor's training. We did that at Tongji University, in Beijing private museums. We did them at Dove. We did them at, a whole bunch of different diverse settings. And in each one, we had no more than 25 people. And we asked them to, we wanted them to feel what the future could feel like. Not spec it out, not give us numbers that numb, not define scenarios. We wanted to define the future with excitable feeling, passionate feeling.
Thanks,
And then
Peggy.
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. I think we love it, and we have got tons of questions for you. I myself have got several questions, but I think one of the things that I really picked up from your presentation, especially in the Smart Grid Forum that you were showing earlier, is there are several key pillars within, right? Two of them is actually impactful and scalability. And I would like to, before we came back to you for further questions, I would like to turn to Vanessa and Raymond about your insights and thoughts. I mean, Hong Kong is a 7 million people city and just over 1,000 square kilometers. So when we think about impactful and scalability, so would like to learn from your response on this. Maybe we start with Vanessa.
So hi everyone, I'm Vanessa. Thanks, Peggy. Still digesting the information you've been given. I'll be super quick. In terms of to address what Anthony just asked, I think it's very appropriate segue to what I was going to share today. Yeah. For us, from the Nantong Group, most of you know us as a real estate developer. But I'll share our most recent update of the company, which is am I showing my slides now? Oh, okay. And then I only have 3 slides, so don't worry. Next slide, please. So it's our most recent campaign. It is, we believe, not only creating places that people feel safe and can better their quality of life, but what we further believe in is to create a very strong social infrastructure for people to enable people to drive behavioral change, form habits that can get every individual's lives, be it in work and for fun, to be impactful and purposeful. So some of the recent initiatives, thanks to COVID, we get to be more internal looking and reflective and work on every single individual employee, because I think everyone cannot agree more that mentally everyone's very exhausted and can use more love. Can I have the next slide? We want some of the little changes we've made. Oh, sorry. I forgot. So we've come up with this SOIT sustainability framework, which actually it's more of a purpose framework. SOIT is an acronym of these 5 pillars that we come up with. S is for social cohesion. E is for environmental sustainability. W is for wellness, so helpful health. IT is innovation and technology. So under these 5 pillars, we've come up with from small projects internally to larger projects externally to drive behavior change. And I will give you a real life example that you all can join at the end of this panel to experience it yourself. So this is we call it the SOIT wheel. It's an exercise or activity wheel that we put in every single meeting room, and everyone gets to spin it every 10 minutes, so to get people to shake things up a bit. I'll end with that, because later you'll get to have a full experience on this, and I'll pass it to Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Vanessa. So hello, everyone. I'm Raymond. I'm a co-founder of Pharmacy. It's a Hong Kong-based urban farming technology startup. Just now, Peggy shared a very beautiful story of over the past 15 years, on a policy perspective, like how she could drive the change in such a big country, and at the same time, Vanessa also talk about from a big corporation point of view what they're doing, for Hong Kong, and then for a tiny company like us, right, which is a lot of companies in Hong Kong, more than 300K companies, has been thinking like if they want to contribute, what or where they can do. right? So it has been our questions. Okay, so even though we are a technology company, we are not going to talk about technology today, but then we are going to talk about what exactly we want to solve in terms of the urbanization. What Peggy just shared. Over the past 15 years, how China do, and then in Hong Kong, more than 99% of our land are urbanized. So what is exactly the problems right now? We're going to try. You can see that actually under the urbanization, we have very big challenges in terms of the food source and also food supply. In Hong Kong, most of our vegetables, more than 98.3%, are actually not coming from Hong Kong. They are from the imported. And then why I have to share these slides, because you see this figure, but then there's a lot of more scary figures. This is actually coming because of that. Okay, so first of all, because we are not, really self-sustainable and self-sufficient, so we have to import a lot of food, and it creates a lot of carbon emission. If every single city in this world worked like Hong Kong, then this is not only 70% of the carbon emission from food traffic, it would be a lot more. But at the same time, what we do in Hong Kong right now, we got a lot of money to buy the food outside, but at the same time, it's actually greatly degraded because of the transportation. And food waste as well, because the whole supply chain is not sustainable. You pre-order, and then once they degrade, you have to discard it. According to SCMP, every single day, the supermarkets in Hong Kong, they discard 29 tons of fresh food. And 47% of this is vegetables, which means that every single day, we dispose at least 14 tons, okay? So this is something that we would love to address. And as a small company, how we can do, okay? I think it's probably not only the 2 slides that I'm talking about the technology. We want to empower people to farm, because we think it is not only our role to farm for the city, but then actually to get people join hands together by sharing our technology, which is using the IoT, the cloud-based system and all that, which I'm not going to go into details. But to make sure, that this concrete jungle, we can unlock the unused space to farm. So, how to do it? Of course, we can do some deployable farm system, which is totally sustainable, to make the food waste minimized, and then we can retain the nutrition and freshness, and then make it, as a Secretary for Labor and Welfare said, scalable, affordable. That's very important, making use of the space to do it. And then this slide is actually something that I really want to do and then share, because even though the farm is very tiny, but then we start tracking the impact at the very beginning. We want to know what exactly the energy that we consume, how we are going to manufacture it, but at the same time compare to the carbon emission that we created by the imported vegetables, what will be the saving. And then we collaborate with also another startup about tracking the carbon emission. We are very glad, to see at least, our model, every single square meter of farms, we can save 1 ton of CO2. So it is a very tiny unit, but at least we got something measurable. And then we can starting to imagine that if we can scale up, not only 1 square meter, but then a lot of square meter, then what kind of impact it can drive. But again, we know that I agree 100% with Peggy about, the cultural gap and cultural awareness, the importance of driving it to become a daily normal for everyone. So in Hong Kong, I think if I ask everyone here who want to do a healthier lifestyle, definitely everyone will raise their hand, right? But then how many of us will really, truly embrace and to know how to do it and where to do it? Probably this is the question. And I think this is something that we have to do not only in Hong Kong, but also across Asia. So the purpose of pharmacy is not only about giving them the technology and getting everyone to farm, but also looking into how to get the awareness of people so that the end users can join in with the corporations and also our partners to do it together. So we do many things like this, putting it, of course, it's a business model there that we are not going to discuss in details today, but you can see how to unlock it in supermarkets, how to do it in malls, to get people say, oh, okay, so this is something, there's alternative solutions happening in the city, in a commercial building. Also, restaurants, hotels is Marriott Hotel. And then at the same time, do some, related projects that is to the farm to table. And all these things is commercial, but then I think that it's very important that, commercial is actually part of us. And then we have to create that kind of sense of delights, to create that. But then I think the most important thing is to get people really get engaged in it so that everyone feel that they can be part of it. And I think later on we can talk more about, how we can work with education institutions, government, to do that. And this is something that we are very proud because it's not only about our company, but then we join hands with the government and also with the NGOs, to create a K-Farm project that is on the Kennedy Town coastal line. We empower and then to contribute the ideas, contribute our expertise, and then to get the NGOs to really on board, and then to run the only the community farm in the heart of the city. So this is something that is not exactly built by us. We have to thank the green architect, which is in the middle. So he's Vicky, to create that kind of things. But then this is something that we have been doing, and then right now we're not exactly only doing in Hong Kong. I just fly back from Singapore, and then we're going to Thailand. So we also can channel out this kind of model and this kind of spirit, not only in Hong Kong, but also other part of the world as well.
Thank you so much indeed. I couldn't agree more with you on the importance and the strategic part of the stakeholder engagement. When all three speakers were sharing, I keep writing down about loads of questions. But in our lives, we learn try not to be too greedy. So in light of time, I've got one question for all three of you. Just basically one key takeaway to share with our audience. It could be some of the key pushbacks or key lessons that you have learned over the years, or one of the examples that you would love to share in terms of collaborating with NGOs or organizations, or some of the megatrends looking forward that you think would have an impact on our topic today, catalyzing societal change for a greener future. Maybe I start with Peggy.
Sure. Well, I'll give a preview of the Tornado Leadership Masterclass that I'm going to give for you all, which is after doing these changes, which is 7 China-wide changes and many failures, what I realized looking back is that the way to make societal scale change is very similar to a tornado. It's actually more important to focus on building momentum than the metrics. It's very important to focus on the resonance of how everybody is getting together versus the how and planning how everybody gets to an outcome. You almost have to let go of the expectations of the outcome because they could be grander than you think. So hopefully the organizers will tell you when you can join me for that 2-hour, I think, masterclass to learn how you launch a tornado movement, how you strengthen it, and then how you harness the vortex of that tornado to get to a tipping point for society. So everybody can do this and make changes in society within 3 years. Awesome. So I look forward to sharing that with you.
Thanks, Peggy. And over to you, Raymond.
I think, I agree with Peggy a lot. It's about, how to, I think social innovation and how to change society is a process of learning and empowering. We learn a lot through working with different partners, and then we can get the ideas of how we can make it scale and make it impactful to the other part of the society and community as well. Take school as an example. We learn a lot through the commercialization and also our technologies, and we learn that actually because of our technology can provide the safe environment for planting, but at the same time we're not scalable enough to make that very impactful in terms of the production. So we can think, okay, maybe we work with schools, empower the future generation to learn the STEM education. And then because of the environment that we can provide is so safe, so everything is actually edible and very safe, right? We can encourage them to donate it to the needed community just nearby. Okay, so in that kind of social innovation is about not only about the technology itself, but then also like how to use it. And then through this, it's not only about something that we think from the very beginning, but then through the learning, through working with the partners, then we know how to do it better and better every time. And I think this is actually the core of the social innovation.
Thanks for the wise words, Raymond. Vanessa.
I love being the last. I agree with both of you. And to add to that, I think everyone should really embrace your own inner compassion and curiosity, because that is something that can constantly fuel yourself to do whatever you love in things you have to do. And stop thinking so much shoulds, but more can and will. And there are many people here that can enable you, that would love to join forces with you to do things together. So always ask and share. And yeah.
Thank you. And when I remember that when I teach sustainability at university, there's one thing I always emphasize: you just can't fake your passion, right? But I'm so glad to have all three of you here today to share with us, why we have got lots of passionate, like-minded people here, but it's the how thing that matters. And Vanessa, I guess you have something that you want to quickly share with us?
Oh yes, we'll do it now, quickly, because we only have 40 seconds. So.
Should we stand? Or?
Oh, sure, let's stand. Everyone, hopefully,
everyone.
This is the SES wheel that hopefully, by popular demand, Rebecca and SES will adopt this wheel next year, then everyone can do it more during a summit. So I will start the wheel, and Raymond will say stop, and whatever the spinny thing lands on, we have to do. All right, let's start. I think. Go.
Stop. Oh.
Gently bump elbows with people on either side.
That's meaningful.
Okay, let's quickly, so we can do a second one. Oh no, overrun. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, start.
Start.
Stop. Okay, that's not the same. Sense the beautiful moment. Close your eyes and for 15 seconds and take a deep breath. What we need, right?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. We're overrun, so it's less than 15 seconds.
That's a trial version, right?
Yeah,
it's a
we
trial
urge
version.
you to continue and create your own wheel, and thank you.
Yes,
thank you
so
very much.
A round of applause for all three of Peggy, Vanessa, and Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you, all of our guests, for such an insightful discussion. And thank you, Peggy, for joining us virtually. The section has ended here. You may leave now. And thank you once again for all these funny things. It could be as simple as a wheel that makes us feel that we're at the present. And thank you all for such an insightful discussion and reminding us that we always have to start small, and from there we can project the small idea into a bigger picture by scaling it. That's how we change the world for the better. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take this opportunity to ask for your valuable feedback. Please take some time to fill in the feedback form by scanning the QR code on the screen right now. Thank you very much. And up next, we're very honored to have Hong Kong's blind marathon runner, Miss Inti Fu, to lead us the way of running along the theme of this summit, Bounce Forward Together, and share with us her story of how the loss of her vision actually gives her a second life. To be specific, she has already completed 22 marathons and counting. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's put our hands together to welcome Mr. Louis Howe, Deputy CEO of Dialogue in the Dark Hong Kong Foundation Limited, and Miss Inti Fu. Let's give them a big round of applause. Over to you.
Hello， 大家好啊！講到嘢，你試下講下嘢先。未得喎，再 test 下先。好，我哋講住先。我有咪嘛？好。咁啊，今日咧好高興同大家有10零分鐘時間咧分享下，亦都轉下 channel 啦，講下廣東話啊。 我係 Louis 啊，打類嘅打嘅 Deputy CEO。今日咧請嚟咧一個好精彩嘅我哋嘅同事啦，一個好精彩人生嘅 Inti 咧，同我哋傾下喎。係啊，仲未有聲住，唔緊要啊，用住我咪先啦。OK， 好 ，Inti 不如事不宜遲啦，你講下你自己嘅故事好唔好啊？我借啲咪俾你先。
好 ，Thank you Louis。Hello， 大家好啊。係啊，我係 Inti， 係黑暗中對話嘅同事喎。咁咧，我而家嘅情況咧，眼睛咧就完全睇唔到嘅。咁所以咧，可唔可以俾啲掌聲我哋兩位啊？等我知道下咧，呢度啊，我就下耳啊，聽到啦，60-70人到啦，咁樣。係啊，因為咧，我就16歲嗰陣時確診咗青光眼，咁而家咧完全失明。咁所以你哋嘅聲音咧，對我嚟講咧就好重要啦。咁我而家喺黑暗中對話咧，係一個全職嘅同事嚟嘅，咁係負責做一啲文職嘅工作，咁亦都係一啲咧活動嘅導師嚟嘅。咁我咧會分享多少少俾你聽，喺我工作上面嘅，係啦。咁我而家事不宜遲啊，開始得啦，係咪啊？你得㗎啦，開始得啦。講下你自己嘅人生先啦。係啦。咁其實咧我就生長喺一個咧好溫暖嘅家庭入邊，不過咧我就唔聽話。咁點解咧？16歲嗰陣時咧，我有1009度近視，1900度，咁好深嘅近視啦。跟住咧，同年16歲嗰陣時就確診咗慢性嘅青光眼。咁其實慢性嘅青光眼佢唔係一日就奪去我嘅視力嘅。咁我做咗好多手術啦，食藥，做激光。嗰陣時讀緊中4嘅，咁一路做咁多嘢咧。10年左右啦，但係都冇辦法挽回視力。咁終於20零歲我就完全睇唔到。咁睇唔到嘅初期咧，其實我都出咗嚟做嘢㗎啦。但係咧屋企人同我都好難去相處。咁點解咧？要磨合㗎，因為突然間一個睇到嘢嘅人變得睇唔到，有工返就變咗冇工返咗，成日喺屋企喎。咁都好多摩擦。朋友叫我去食飯咩？我就冇信心去食啦。因為點解啊？同你食個飯，我都要望住你眼嘅 eye contact 唔到啊，咁夾唔到餸好尷尬，我真係冇信心出去食飯。咁於是乎咧，就成日收埋自己喺屋企啦。咁但係我亦未至於放棄自己嘅，即係都過咗1-2年就試下復康訓練啊，學下啲發聲嘅點樣用電腦啊，盲人嘅日常嗰個生活技能啊，出街咧用白手杖啊。咁好啦，我覺得我真係實在充滿咗力量，我可以去揾翻份工去做。咁有一日，我就同我爸爸咧去揾工，只係一份活動助理。我以前都做開文職嘅，做一個客戶服務員嚟嘅。咁嗰個活動助理咧去見工，我連 form 都填唔到，因為對方話咧冇電子版嘅申請表。咁佢冇啦，咁我就填唔到啦，因為係一個紙版。寫唔到喎。係啊，咁佢就話：好難。你連張入職表都填唔到，你點樣做活動助理啊？我哋呢度好多馬路要過，好多燈啊乜嘢啊咁樣，好複雜個交通，好危險嘅，你返唔到。佢唔請我，咁我就同爸爸啦，好失落咁樣行出咗嗰個門口啦。咁我就喊得好犀利，因為咧，即係我冇諗住人哋連見都未見就已經。你諗住請你嘅？唔係見都未見都冇得見啊嘛！唔請我啊，係啊，咁我就喊得好犀利。咁我爸爸就話：你人哋唔請你唔緊要，爸爸咧會養你一世嘅。咁但係咧，我覺得哇，都20幾歲啦，我應該養屋企人，而唔係屋企人養翻我轉頭。咁我就真係好唔聽話，我拒絕咗佢。後嚟我都過咗一段好長時間好失落嘅日子㗎。終於咧，我就遇上咗一條繩，佢就將我轉變咗人生啦。我知道咧，你嗰陣時好多嘢都冇咗嘅喎，冇工做啦，係咪男朋友又冇咗啦？即係咩都失晒嘅喎，係嘛？其實嗰陣時你嘅感受係點啊？嗰陣時可以係話3失㗎，失明啦、失業啦、失戀啦咁啊。係啊，咁其實個人生都跌到落谷底，咁每一日起身咧，即係屋企冇人咧，就喺度喊㗎，唔知做咩好啊嘛喺屋企。係後來就係話遇上咗一條繩啊。嗰條繩咩繩啊？魔術繩。係俾我做運動啊！大家估下，嗰條繩知唔知係做咩運動啊？咦係啦，我哋有 fans 喺度。領跑喎，啱喎，多謝你。係啊 ，OK。啱咪用呢個咪凳。
你繼續
轉入翻，係啊，唔好意思啊。咁後來我遇上咗馬拉松啊，佢改變咗我嘅人生啊。咁其實咧，馬拉松大家都知唔係一個好容易嘅事情可以完成。咁喺生命之後咧，我就經歷咗咧35度底下去跑山，跟住咧拉車胎，跟住咧亦都黃雨底下咧跑咗30幾 K， 係準備比賽。
你以前係咪細個跑開啊？
冇，我1900度近視，我係踩單車、游水、跑步，全部唔得㗎，唔識㗎。
OK。
咁跟住咧呢一啲嘅開始之後咧，咁頭開始梗係想死啦，好辛苦啦，係咪？咁但係咧，我發現原來哇馬拉松可以帶我去看世界嘅喎。咁點解咧？一般咧去旅行你會搭車啦，係咪？行去觀光啦，係咪？慢慢行。我多咗一樣嘢，我用腳用雙腳去漫遊嗰個城市，深度遊可以係咁講。因為咧馬拉松原來42.195公里咧，係揀咗咧當地城市一個最靚嘅風景，我嚟做嗰個路段，甚至乎好似我哋喺睇下先嗰個叫咩？青馬大橋，平時唔行得噶嘛，唔跑得噶嘛，封晒路噶嘛。咁我哋就可以用腳咧喺嗰個地方去參觀。咁我身邊嘅領跑員咧好精彩嘅喎，佢一邊咧做緊領跑員，一邊咧就做導遊，係咁介紹側邊左啊右啊前面啊有啲乜嘢風景啊咁樣。咁其實我都可以咧用我唔同感官去感受到當地嘅氣息。仲有隔岸兩邊會有啲乜嘢㗎？跑道嘅兩邊係有啲係啦，當地嘅 fans 啦咁樣，一路咧就會攞住當地嘅食物啊，有啲咩好食嘅嘢就攞出嚟請我哋食嘅喎。仲有一樣嘢好緊要，我嘅即係跑衫啊，前面啦同埋背脊都印住咩啊 ？Hong Kong Bright Runner 呢幾個字咧，哇！佢哋見到咧特別嗌得大聲嘅，特別為我哋歡呼喝彩。呢個時候咧，我就咧充滿咗自信咁樣覺得咧，我係香港嘅代表香港嘅視障朋友，代表咗佢哋嘅精神㗎。咁因為跑步咧有安多芬啊，各位啊，其實我係麻醉緊自己，因為有安多芬好開心啊嘛。阿
Inti 啊，係啦，我又問下你先。咁今次我哋嘅主題咧就係 Bounce Forward 喎。我頭先聽到你話喂好三失嘅時候就好凄涼啦，係咪先啦？咁又跑步又好似令到你嘅人生唔同咗喎。咁你講下其實失明對你嚟講有咩意義咧？
其實咧到依家為止啦，我失明咗10幾年，但係我感激失明嘅。因為點解咧？喺失明裏面，我經歷咗嘅嘢咧，其實係我諗我以前一個即係好普通嘅 OL 係經歷唔到。係啊，咁我喺運動之後啦，我就鍛鍊咗譬如運動，我頭先經歷嗰啲咁開心嘅即係比賽，咁我會覺得一個又一個比賽咁樣完成，我會多咗我嘅自信心同毅力嘅。咁而喺工作同我嘅運動有咩拉得上嘅關係咧？我以前有一句説話叫做跑到步跑到數，因為咧跑到步跑到數係我失明後第一份工咧，我做 sales 嘅，做一個 tele sales。咁當時咧翻工咧，哇！一朝早咧追唔到數咩，就繼續努力。我要搣到 target，我就放工咧，我就好放心去跑步啦。咁以前我做咗5年，5年裡面咧都得我一個視障嘅員工嘅啫。咁每年我咧一係跑第一，一係就跑第二。你講跑步定跑數啊？跑數。哦，即係第日有跑數嘅公司都要去跑埋步，可以咁樣就好啲。即係聽嚟你真係 bounce forward 嘅喎，即係比以前可能睇到嘢嘅時候係更加進步咗，更加向前行，係咪咁講啊？我自己覺得係㗎。OK。好啦，因為咧我睇住個時間啊。咁啊，你個咪應該 OK 喎，你試下講嘢啊。係 testing。哇，正晒啊！好啦，我見大家咧都坐咗幾個鐘頭啦，咁我知道你係運動員嚟㗎嘛。係啊。不如咁啊，我哋邀請大家，你帶大家做一啲熱身嘅嘢啊，熱身運動鬆一鬆好唔好啊？好啊，咁大家都坐咗一段時間啦。停一停先，我想音樂起先。好啊。好啊，唔該晒音樂。哇，即刻嚟啦！好嘅，交俾你。我哋要點樣做啊？我哋係咪企晒起身㗎？好，我哋咧物理治療師話㗎嚇，我哋咧每1個鐘頭最好咧坐喺度做嘢嘅時候咧都企起身喎，等我哋咧可以血液循環一下。咁請大家全部企起身先，係啦，企晒起身啦。甚至乎咧，你好似我咁着裙，你都做到呢3組動作嘅。我哋包括會做頸、腰同埋咧肩胛骨。肩胛骨喺邊啊？ 呢一個叫肩胛骨
係
上背。
係我盡量做，OK，你可以示範啦。
係啦，因為大家冇事嘅，件衫都係咁靚仔，出翻去。咁我哋先做第一個動作啦。我哋咧就要雙腳與肩同寬咧，隻手咧就自然咧垂落嚟就可以啦。好，我哋輕輕將個頭部耷低，將個頭部耷低。呢個時候咧，你嘅下巴去揾呢個鎖骨嘅位置。我哋保持10秒，將我哋嘅頸部嘅位置咧肌肉去放鬆。唔知你會唔會覺得好掹、好繃緊呢？我就會啦。好，我哋10秒，5、4、3、2、1。好，慢慢咧上翻嚟，回復翻咧正常嘅位置。跟住第二個動作，我想你將兩隻手啊舉起啊，擺喺你嘅後尾枕嘅位置啊。係啊 ，O 唔 OK 啊？跟住咧，慢慢將我哋嘅頭咧往後喎。呢個時候亦都係伸展緊我哋個頸嘅位置嘅。如果你係低頭一族，成日咧用電腦啊、用手機咧，呢個時候你就會感覺到有啲效果出到嚟㗎啦。我哋同樣做10秒，5、4、3、2、1。好，我哋慢慢上翻正中嘅位置，雙手垂低。咁做完前啦，做完後啦，咁我哋梗係做下左啦同埋右啦。好啦，大風吹，一吹向我哋嘅左邊。我哋將咧耳仔盡量去揾膊頭，係啦。呢個時候右邊咧嘅頸部其實係咧拉扯緊嘅。同樣咧保持10秒，5、4、3、2、1。好，慢慢咧翻去正中嘅位置。做完左就做右啦。好啦，一個大風吹，將佢吹向右邊，耳仔盡量去揾膊頭。哇，左邊嘅膊頭唔知你有冇拉扯咧？好啦，5、4、3、2、1。好，我哋將個頭翻去正中嘅位置。好啦，第二組嘅動作咧，阿 Louis 可能你要幫我示範前面，我就示範後面。點樣為之前面咧？好，我哋咧將我哋嘅右手啦放喺左邊嘅膊頭。咁我調轉咯喎。咁左手做咩咧？擺喺條腰後邊。然後咧，我哋個人咧就好似扭毛巾咁，向左邊扭。佢阿 Louis 手親。好，扭到幾多得幾多。呢個時候咧，我想你將你嘅眼咧望住右邊腳嘅腳踭。右邊腳踭望後邊，係啦，望你嘅背脊後邊，得唔得啊？盡力啦，做到幾多得幾多。我哋同時間咧伸展緊個腰部，亦都伸展緊我哋嘅頸部。係啊，覺唔覺得啊？好正啊！佢話，好，5、4、3、2、1，好，翻去正中嘅位置啦。咁咧都係咧做翻同一個動作，但係都係調轉方向嘅。左手放喺右邊嘅膊頭，係啦，咁我又調轉啦。右手放喺腰後面喎。呢個時候我哋嘅身體向右邊扭毛巾，係啦，扭到幾多得幾多，轉到幾多得幾多，人唔同嘅。同時間咧，你嘅眼睛咧，我想你將你嘅眼望左腳嘅腳踭喎，睇下得唔得先。呢個時候咧，如果你咧坐得多，你個腰應該都比較緊，好似我咁樣。Louis，你係咪都好緊啊？哦，佢話佢過唔到一處。好，咁我哋5、4、3、2、1，好啦，擰翻去正中嘅位置啦。沖晒，好啦，跟住下一組嘅動作咧，我哋就做邊啊？做肩胛骨嘅位置。肩胛骨咧，即係上背。咁我亦都係要調轉啦，咁樣。咁呢個喺前面，我就調轉啦，俾個背脊大家睇。好啦，將我哋左手咧放喺背後面喎，手背貼住我哋嘅背部，盡量咧貼到幾上就得幾上，人唔同㗎嚇。可能你喺腰嘅位置唔緊要，可能你貼到肩胛骨嘅位置都 OK 嘅。咁呢個時候我哋咧係用個手踭去畫圓圈，由前畫向後，先係畫一個豉油碟咁大。豉油碟畫完，我哋試下畫個湯圓咯。湯碗 ，sorry， 湯碗。跟住如果畫到湯碗咧，再大少少畫個平底鑊咧，係啦，會唔會覺得有少少感覺咧？就係好似有啲 Keynote 嘅感覺。如果有嘅話咧，即係我哋咧真係用得電腦比較多喎，成日都固定咗一個位置喎。 時間關係，我哋轉手啦，右手同樣咧畫豉油碟，豉油碟畫完畫湯碗啊，畫完湯碗咧就畫一個平底喎。係啦，我哋每日要做幾多先至咧係對我哋嘅上背係好咧？呢個動作咧每日可以左右啦，每邊畫30次。30下啦，咁每一日咧畫到3次就最好啦。呢個動作有咩好處咧？預防50肩啊！係啊，因為佢可以咧做到嘅，打開我哋嘅肩胛骨啦、胸肌啦同埋三角肌嘅。
好啦，時間關係夠鐘咯喎。咁啊，翻去記得做喎，大家嚇30次係嘛？好，我哋俾啲掌聲啊 Inti 分享佢嘅故事啊，亦都好專業咁帶我哋做咗一啲運動啦。OK，thank you 咯，我同你落翻台啦 ，thank you。
好，多謝大家。
多謝晒 Inti、Louis， 再次俾啲大聲啲、熱烈啲嘅掌聲，多謝佢哋好嘛？多謝晒，請到台下就坐。Thank you Inti and Louis for this stretching exercise, a very much needed energy booster in this afternoon. Just a gentle reminder to remind ourselves we should stand up every hour so that we don't have stiff necks and shoulders.